I'm so grateful to be here today, and I want to join with Tom in saying that I am so sorry we cannot be together in person. I will tell you that the whole board got together, and several other volunteers got together to move chairs and measure out 6 feet of distance and make sure that the table was all set for us, and we had arrows on the floor. And then we came in one more time, just a few of us, to make sure we had the tech part right. And we had done everything possible, and it still sounded like, well, frankly, the music sounded like Chewbacca was singing. And so Clay looked at me, and I looked at him, and he looked at Jackson, and I made some phone calls. And the decision of the board was that we cannot offer this as who we are. It was just too substandard. And that was including the fact that when we put we were working with the visual part of the streaming, it kept stopping and starting because our internet is pretty substandard. It always has been, and now with so many people being online, it's having even more trouble keeping up. So please join with me in knowing that there are other ways to be connected, and that we will find other times and other venues and other ways to come together in spirit. So, part of what's going on right now and what's hard for people is that the world doesn't look like what we were all raised to expect to live in, right? And as a minister, I'm researching what our options are and hearing that this is the new normal, and we have to work with what we've got. As religious scientists, we know that we look at what is, the reality on the ground, the facts on the ground, and then we see through it to the absolute truth and allow a new way of being in the world to come forward based on that. So that picture we had on the screen during meditation was the sun above a whole bunch of clouds. And it felt perfect for me today, because what I'm remembering is that even if I look up and see what looks like clouds, I know the sun is still there. I know that we are all standing under the same sky, no matter where we're coming in from. And so we get to have faith in that. We get to remember that our community is not the building, it's the people. I can't tell you how many times as a regional support coordinator, I have worked with communities that were having trouble, and I had to remind them, the building is not the church. The community is the body of the Christ consciousness in form. It's the people. And so what we have to remember is that, no, it doesn't look like what we thought it would. It doesn't mean it's gone away completely. The principle is still there. The love is still there. I remember when I was a little girl, like probably late middle school, early junior high. We lived in New York, and we went into the city as a family, and we went to St. Patrick's Cathedral. And to me, that was what a church, a holy place, should look and feel like. That's not what we have. It ceased to feed me in the way that I needed it to as I grew up. And so as much as I love the Catholic Church and a lot of stuff about it, I had to be willing to go try something new. And I'm sure that many of you had to go do that too. Allow the principle to be what's eternal and allow the form to change, remembering that it's all connected. It's all still the same principle. I remember being at that church specifically because there was a wedding going on. And she looked like a princess, and her father walking her down the aisle was just like out of central casting. And it was the big, poofy white dress and the a million miles, to me, long train behind it. And they were just beautiful. And that's what I thought a wedding was supposed to look like. Yesterday, I had the honor and privilege of doing another wedding, and it was very casual in someone's backyard. It was kids running around. It was being able to stop and allow the children of this family to speak up and answer their own vows. And part of what I loved was that in front of the regular chairs, the family had put together blankets with pillows so that the kids could just sprawl out there and watch the wedding and participate in the wedding in the way that worked best for them. It was a beautiful community. But those two weddings were very, very different, weren't they? Neither one was wrong. They were connected to each other in that they were both a celebration of love. They were both a testament that love is the truth between all souls. And so as we move forward in this world that looks so different, not bad, not better, not worse in my mind, simply different, the same principles that were always at work and carrying us forward, the same natural laws that were at work 1,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago, and this time in 2019, those same principles are at work right now, and we get to use them. And it's on us to remember, not just that we can use them, but to use them. That's on us, guys. So that beautiful experience of the two different weddings and some of the research I've been doing this week, several of us watched a webinar about the future of church. And by church, I mean any spiritual community. This happened to be aimed at Christians, so they used the word church. Part of what they talked about, which I found wonderfully inspiring and something that we can absolutely use, it's a principle that we can use, is that this idea that the church has left the building and it's going back to what the early Christians did, which was home churches, gathered around watch parties. How easy is it to pick up your laptop or tablet and go sit with friends and watch this service whenever and wherever works for you and your friends? How many of you have invited people to watch with you, or to, whether you just send them the link online or you actually say, hey, I know you don't have access to the internet. Let's watch it together. If you have done that, please write something in the comments. If you think that would be fun, please write that in the comments. And maybe we can get something like that started and set up. You see, we're not bound. Principle isn't bound by precedent. It's something that we know. And yet, I've been saying we can't keep doing church the way we've always done church since my interviews to get this pulpit 10 years ago. I have said it and said it and said it, and yet I have not managed to come to a place where I know what the new thing looks like. So there's a whole bunch of opportunities for us now to, Nora, somebody other who I was listening to, there's too many podcasts. One of the ministers I was listening to said, many of us got shoved over a cliff by this pandemic without the parachute. And so we have to build it as we're flying. We happen to be flying in a downward direction without the parachute, but I'm still calling it flying. So the future is that actually we're going to get old school. You want to go back to the old way of doing things? Christian churches started in homes, small groups, getting together and knowing each other intimately, sharing with each other of their good. What if you could do this as a dinner party? There's nothing that says you can't. For once, finally, I get to break the rule I had when I was a kid that the TV couldn't be on during dinner. Yes, it can, because we're all watching the same service and we can pause it to comment. And not just, oh, did you see her cat walked behind her? We can pause it to comment and say, I don't know that I agree with that. The speaker just said something that to me doesn't make any sense. Let's talk about that as a group. These are the options available to us to reconnect in a new way. It's the conversations and the people we're missing, folks. So let's recreate that. The other way we can go old school and go back to the way things were is that this movement Religious science, as founded by Ernest Holmes, was a school, not a church. They came to, yes, there were lectures offered on Sundays, but they weren't church services. They kind of started acting like church services because that's what the one mind knew how to do. That's what our race consciousness, we as a group knew how to make this into a church. And so we molded it until it felt familiar. But when this started, it was Ernest Holmes alone on a platform, and he wouldn't even allow flowers, much less anything else on that platform with him. There was no music. There was no chanting. There was no candle lighting. There was none of that. It was a lecture. Now, I'm not up for lecturing as much as perhaps he was. But I am up for going old school and following the footsteps of our founder in using the technology that is available to us to reach as many people as possible. Ernest Holmes was one of the very first people to have a radio ministry. And then he was one of the very, very first ministers to have a TV show. So by being willing to create community using all the technology available to us, we are actually going back to the way things used to be, maybe a little before our time. And through all of it, no matter what format we use, the truth is that we are gathering around the principle that God is all there is, and it is showing up as, in, through, and for all of us. My heart breaks for the people who don't have internet right now, who so miss being together in person. Believe me, I feel for them. They are in my prayers. We are all actually still one center, and yet for some people, they simply can't see through those clouds to the sun for lots of different reasons. Maybe they just physically can't do internet. Lots of reasons. It's ours to find a way to work around that. It's ours to find a way to be proactive. We all still have phones. We all still have email. And if none of that feels quite right, we can go stand outside somebody's front window and talk to them through the window. Looks a little weird, but in this day and age, maybe not so weird. This spiritual lifestyle is supposed to be a 7-day-a-week, 24/7, 365 life. And so if we have accidentally smushed it into a couple hours on Sunday, then the highest and best part of ourselves is going to break us out of that restriction, because principle refuses to be bound by precedent. Just because that's how we think it should be done doesn't mean that's how it has to be. The same truth, the same principle of that oneness in many different forms that exists in the real world and online exists in our philosophy as a spiritual truth. We are all connected, and we all learn that in 3rd grade science. We're connected at an atomic level. If I were to put my finger right there on well, I'm not going to put it on the lens because that would just make a mess. If I were to put my finger right there on the camera, part of my fingers, the molecules and the atoms within my fingers are actually a little bit joined with the camera itself. And that's a little freaky. But it's also the truth. The chair you are sitting on right now is actually connected to you at an atomic level. And so we are connected to one another through all of space and time. Ernest Holmes would say that a lot of our behavior comes from our subjective mind. And by subjective, I mean not quite conscious. It might be subconscious, it might be completely unconscious. But in any case, though, that's where a lot of our behavior starts, because that's where our beliefs are mostly held. And so we walk around this world with all the experiences we have ever had still connected to us through our subconscious or unconscious mind. More than that, it's all the experiences anyone has ever had. This is what we call the collective unconsciousness or race consciousness. It's all the experiences and beliefs of the human race ever. We're tied to that. And so that is part of who we are. Whether we like it all, whether we dislike parts of it, it doesn't matter. That's part of who we are. When we are told to be, when the master teacher Jesus said, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, what he meant was perfect with a capital P. And a better word for that we use when we're talking about it is whole. Every aspect of ourselves, the spirit of life itself is whole. There's nothing left out. There's nothing missing, and there's nothing extraneous. There's nothing extra in there. We might judge it as not so helpful, but there's nothing missing in spirit, and there's nothing extra. And so we are told to love and accept ourselves in the same way as whole beings. And when we do that, we have the power of that one mind. The race consciousness is built up of experiences and beliefs that are existent within one vast, intricate, infinite mind that we all have access to. And because we all have access to that, when I do prayer work for somebody else, when I as a practitioner work for someone, what I'm doing is kind of recognizing and stepping into the one mind. And I clean up my own head, and I clean up my own consciousness, and I let go of any judgment of the other person or anything that they might have told me I should be judging them for or as. And I see them as a God being, as God in form. I have to be willing to see myself that way as well. I have to be willing to see all of us as God beings. And when I do that, our souls are having a conversation. And whether I speak the prayer out loud, whether they're anywhere close to me physically, what's happening is that in the one mind, there's a new truth being spoken or recognized, a new potential being spoken into being, and that becomes the truth for my client. Now, the client is perfectly at choice about whether they recreate something new or just go back to the old way of being and recreate the illness or the problem. That's not for me to say what they should do. There is another less talked about spiritual practice that we use that absolutely plugs us into that connectedness from which we cannot be separated no matter how much we pretend. That's called visioning. And so as I was listening to all these podcasts, as I'm listening to what all the experts have to teach me, and they do have lots to teach me and all of us, one of the things that kept coming back to me is, without a vision, the people will perish. Without a vision, the people will perish. Not P-A-R-R-I-S-H, not come together as one church, but perish as in a part of us dies. And so I invite you to contemplate and go to prayer around your best ideas for the center. I invite you to email me at revkathleen@cslprescott.org if you are willing to learn the art and science of visioning, so that we can come together as a community and start plugging into not what our best ideas are so much, but what spirit, what the one mind wants to express through us now. There is absolutely no reason for us to start losing track of each other, or to not open the celestial doors wide for people all across the world. When I say have a house party in front of this, I don't just mean in Prescott. I don't care if you're in Timbuk 1 or Timbuktu. You too can be part of this community. If that excites you, please put a comment into the chat section and let us know who you are so that we can reach out. Email me and give me a telephone number or an email or some kind of address that we can say this is who we are. And if this serves you, please join us. Please join us. I know that there are so many people out there feeling very disconnected, and that's a horrible feeling. Ernest Holmes has said that really the only issue that anyone ever came to him with was a belief in separation, a belief that they were somehow apart, separate from their good, the good life that they wanted, life as a whole, love. They were separate from love somehow. And the answer was always the spiritual truth, which is that we cannot be separated from that. There is nowhere else to be. And so while I invite you to come vision with me, and I invite you to listen to that voice within and be truly a part of this community, however that works for you, I invite you to do that because we are of the one mind, and your voice matters. Your voice within this community matters. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if this is the first time you've ever gotten up at midnight and accidentally scrolled through on YouTube and ended up here. Your voice matters. Your consciousness matters. And I will tell you that at the physical level, in some ways that shows up as your vote. We use our voice without having, my vote doesn't mean I go tell somebody else how to vote, ever. My job is to speak my own word. And so I encourage everyone to do that too. Safely, respectfully, and with all the love in your heart. And so at this time, what I'm going to do is go to prayer for the new world that we are creating, keeping the best of everything that has ever been, and stepping into the new forms without having to, as I heard someone say, try to learn to fly while holding on to the eggshells. So let's go within. And if it works for you, go ahead and close your eyes. I'm going to, because that helps me focus on the inner eye. It helps me to remember that God is all there is, and that no matter what the world looks like, God is still all there is, and God is still within me. God is the very truth of my being. It is the life in my body, and it is surrounding me. It exists in, through, and as me in every moment. All of that good, all of that beauty, all of that joy is already an idea in the mind of the divine. And through this process of prayer, I can speak my word. So I do speak my word right here and now for all beings everywhere. And I know that we are filled with loving kindness. I know that as the divine being is whole, so are we whole. Perfect, complete, nothing missing and nothing extra. I know that the divine principle is unchanging, and it takes on form, and then it takes on a new form, and it takes on a new form. And so the new form for us is the same principle of love in all its beautiful forms. And so it shows up in many, many new different people, in many of our people who have been here forever and have been the lifeblood of this center. It shows up all across the nation as people who are now hearing this teaching and awakening to the magnificence of their own souls, ready to live in a world that works for everyone. I call forth from this time and place, I call forth the face of God with all of its different faces to show up here, whether it's digitally or physically, to show up and speak with one voice, saying that love is the truth between us, saying that the divine harmony must be made of many different voices, many different notes coming together, create divine harmony. And so we don't all have to be the same. We all have to be perfectly ourselves. And as that all comes together and weaves itself into a new tapestry, I celebrate that the principle is still perfect, and God is still all there is. And so for that, I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for how spirit works in this world. I'm so grateful for the law of cause and effect, which says that my thoughts, these words that I have spoken, have created a whole new cause and set it into a motion that we will see as the effect, the physical world. The world has been changed by all of us coming together, by these words spoken. And for this, I am so grateful. And so I celebrate it and call it good. And so it is.